When you hear the phrase global economic crisis, your brain probably goes straight to a few very specific, very macroeconomic
Oh,
places.
absolutely, like a
Yeah.
massive recession.
Right, exactly. You think about inflation spiraling out of control, or, I don't know, a complete collapse of the global supply chain with cargo ships just stuck in ports.
Yeah, the highly visible disasters.
Exactly. We've all been trained to look for those massive, obvious threats. But what if the next looming crisis, and I mean one that threatens to wipe out literally trillions of dollars, isn't any of those things?
Right.
What if the real threat is actually a massive, completely silent software failure happening right now in the very infrastructure we use to hire people?
It is a profound shift in perspective. I
Yeah,
mean, we are so conditioned to look at the health of the economy strictly through the lens of, interest rates and consumer
right.
spending.
Traditional metrics.
Exactly. And because of that, we completely miss the plumbing. We miss the underlying digital architecture that actually connects human beings to the work that needs to be done.
And when that plumbing backs up, the entire system just stalls out.
It stalls completely.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are pulling from some incredibly eye-opening materials for this one.
Really fascinating stuff today.
We've got a comprehensive industry analysis on global talent shortages, alongside an executive newsletter and a really detailed post from the founders of a platform called SkillDrift.
Right?
Our mission today is to uncover the mechanics of why the job market feels entirely, well, structurally broken right now. And I mean broken for both sides. For you, the applicant, and for the employers trying to hire you.
It's a lose-lose situation right now.
Totally. We are going to look at how changing the underlying math of how we filter resumes could quite literally save the global economy trillions of dollars.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we really need to start with the actual data on what this failure is costing us.
Yeah, the baseline numbers are what make this an economic crisis rather
Yeah.
than just a standard HR headache.
The primary statistic anchoring our sources today comes from recent IDC projections. They've modeled out the current friction in the labor market.
And what did they find?
Well, they are warning that the global economy risks losing $5.5 trillion by the year 2026.
Wow. Wait, 5.5 trillion?
Trillion, yes. And the root cause of that massive deficit, it's severe technical and AI-related skills shortages. They are projecting that organizations simply won't have the human capital to execute on their technological roadmaps.
$5.5 trillion. I mean, that isn't a rounding error. That is a systemic failure.
Exactly.
But reading through the sources, there is this massive contradiction that is just fascinating. And it's something you, listening right now, have probably felt in your own career.
Well, without a doubt.
On one side of the equation, corporate boardrooms are looking at these macro projections, and they are absolutely panicked. They're leaving mission-critical seats empty for 6, 8, 12 months.
Yeah, they are physically slowing down product development because they claim the talent simply does not exist.
Right. But then you look at the reality on the ground. You have highly capable, brilliant professionals who are sending out literally 200 applications, specifically for roles they know they can do.
And what happens?
They are met with absolute automated silence.
Yeah, it's the defining paradox of the modern knowledge economy.
It really is.
You have executives convinced they are operating this massive talent drought, while an ocean of highly capable professionals feels completely invisible.
Right, the talent is absolutely there.
It is, and what our sources argue is that we are misdiagnosing the disease here. We do not have a talent shortage. We have a severe infrastructure failure.
It's almost like, well, think about a massive warehouse club. It feels like society is starving inside a fully stocked Costco.
I love that analogy.
Right. It's not because there isn't any food on the shelves, but because the barcode scanners at the checkout registers are hard-coded to only recognize items packaged in 1998. The food is right there, people are hungry, but the machine can't process the modern packaging, so it just spits out an error. Nobody gets to eat, and the inventory just sits there gathering dust.
What's fascinating here is how highly accurate that is, as a way to visualize the mechanical failure happening.
Yeah.
The inventory, which is the talent, is abundant. But the system processing that talent is fundamentally incapable of reading modern inputs.
The barcode scanner is broken.
Exactly. And to understand why that barcode scanner is failing, we have to look at the architecture of the applicant tracking system, or the APS.
Right, the dreaded ATS.
Yeah, this is the software gatekeeper that scans your resume, when you submit it into that black hole of an online portal.
And the sources point out that these systems were built on a software logic that belongs in the dial-up era.
Literally the dial-up era.
We are trying to staff the AI revolution using databases designed in the 1990s.
It's absurd when you think about it. If you look at how early ATS platforms were engineered in the late 90s, they were built on very rigid relational databases.
Meaning they just look for exact matches.
Exactly. They relied entirely on exact string matching. Back then, the economy was highly siloed. You had a specific job title, and that title clearly defined a very predictable, rigid set of tasks for a decade.
Right. Jobs didn't change every 6 months like they do now.
Exactly. And because of that predictability, the ATS was programmed to parse for static historical data. It parses for nouns.
Nouns. Here's where it gets really interesting. This whole concept in the text of nouns versus verbs.
Yes, it's a crucial distinction.
The sources make this incredibly compelling argument that modern work isn't about nouns anymore. The work you do today is driven by verbs.
It's active.
Exactly. It's about adaptability, cross-functional execution, rapid upskilling, and, deploying new tools that didn't even exist 6 months ago. The reality of your day-to-day job is an active, constantly shifting verb.
Right.
But the legacy software is mechanically restricted to searching for a static noun.
And that architectural mismatch is exactly what generates the $5.5 trillion deficit. The friction lies completely in the disconnect between the rigid nouns, the software demands, and the dynamic verbs that human beings actually possess.
Let's ground this in the specific example the sources provide, because this really clarifies the mechanics of the failure.
It's a great example.
Okay, so imagine a company urgently needs someone to build automated AI workflows for their data pipeline. It's a critical role. So HR programs the ATS to scan incoming resumes for the exact phrase, the noun AI workflow automation specialist.
Right, they punch in the noun.
Now, put yourself in the applicant's shoes. Let's say your current official job title is financial analyst, but in reality, you are incredibly proactive.
You're doing the actual work.
Exactly. You single-handedly taught yourself Python over the weekend, you built custom language models, integrated them into your company systems, and automated your department's entire monthly reporting structure. You are actively doing the exact verb this hiring company is desperate for.
But from the perspective of the ATS algorithm, you do not exist.
Wow.
Your resume doesn't contain the exact string match for AI workflow automation specialist, so the system's logic gate just closes. Your application is automatically routed to the digital trash before a human eye ever even sees it.
So an ATS is basically a bouncer at a nightclub holding a printed VIP list.
Pretty much.
If your legal name is Robert, but the list says Bob, you aren't getting in, period. It doesn't matter if you are the DJ they literally hired for the night.
Right, you're not on the list.
The bouncer has no capacity for context. They only have capacity for string matching.
And that perfectly captures the lack of semantic understanding in legacy systems. Your capabilities as that financial analyst are completely latent.
They're hidden.
Totally obscured by a job title that fails to capture the reality of your day-to-day execution. The ATS forces multidimensional, highly adaptable human beings to flatten their entire professional existence into a two-dimensional document that a 1990s parser can read.
Okay, but let me push back on this a little bit. Let me play devil's advocate for the companies here.
Sure, go for it.
If I'm a hiring manager and I can't see the underlying skills because my ATS is broken, my default reaction is going to be to look for the exact title match on the open market.
Of course.
And honestly, that feels like a logical risk mitigation strategy to me. If I hire an external candidate who already has the title Director of AI Workflow on their resume and they end up being terrible at the job, I don't get fired.
Right, you have plausible deniability.
Exactly. I can tell my boss, hey, I hired the guy with the title, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
But if I take a risk on a financial analyst and they fail, that's entirely on my head. Isn't this just, corporate self-preservation?
It absolutely is an act of self-preservation, but it is a financially devastating one for the organization as a whole.
How so?
The sources identify this exact behavior as the buy versus build mentality. Because managers are flying blind and trying to mitigate personal risk, they take the path of least resistance.
They just buy the title.
Exactly. They go out onto the open market and they buy those exact title matches. But here is the mechanism of why that is so destructive. It creates what economists call a wage premium.
Right, because everybody's fighting over the exact same small pool of people who happen to have the trendy noun on their LinkedIn profile,
Exactly. The demand for the specific title wildly outpaces the supply of people who hold it.
which drives up the price.
Artificially inflating their market value, yes. Employers end up paying massive premiums. The data shows anywhere from 20 to 50% higher salaries just to acquire an external candidate who holds the correct prior title.
That is a massive premium. You are overpaying by 50% just for the illusion of safety.
And the data gets even more damning. Companies routinely pay that 50% premium even when the external candidate's actual day-to-day competency is fundamentally lower than the overlooked internal applicant whose resume got filtered out.
That's insane.
They are quite literally paying for the pedigree of the noun, not the execution of the capability.
Which naturally brings up the collateral damage of this whole dynamic.
Oh, absolutely.
If we are throwing millions of dollars out the front door to overpay for external titles, what is happening to the people already inside the building? The internal economy of these companies must be an absolute mess.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the destruction of the internal talent economy is the second major inefficiency dragging down that $5.5 trillion figure.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, think about the mechanics of a corporate restructuring. A company decides a certain department is obsolete. Because their internal HR software uses the exact same flawed, noun-based taxonomy, they can only see those employees as their static job titles.
Right.
So they routinely lay off loyal, hardworking employees with deep institutional knowledge. Meanwhile, at the exact same moment, that same company is spending millions of dollars in recruiting fees and wage premiums to hire externally for newly created adjacent roles.
Oh, wow. You were firing someone at the back door while paying a premium to bring a stranger in the front door. When the person you just fired already understands your company's culture, your internal systems, and probably has the baseline logic to do the new job.
Exactly, because the system misses the whole person. It cannot calculate the potential of a human being.
It's blind to it.
It ignores perfectly capable people who could transition into those new high-demand roles with just a few weeks of targeted upskilling.
Just a few weeks.
But because their foundational competencies, their verbs, are invisible to the internal architecture, the only mechanism the company has is to sever the relationship entirely.
It's intellectually lazy and it's deeply demoralizing. So the core of the problem is established. Relying on proxies like past titles and legacy keywords to predict future performance is bankrupting companies and freezing out applicants.
That's the diagnosis, yes.
The obvious question then is, how do we fix the barcode scanner? If the ATS is blind to verbs, how do we build an infrastructure that can actually read them?
This is where the sources pivot to the structural solution proposed by the platform SkillDrift.
Right. Let's get into SkillDrift.
The premise of SkillDrift is to entirely dismantle the proxy-based hiring system. They argue that we don't need to write better resumes.
Okay.
We need to abandon the resume altogether in favor of verified capability mapping. We need a mathematical way to verify and visualize what people can actually execute.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of how they actually do that, because the sources outline three major pillars in this new architecture.
Yes, three main shifts.
First, how do you actually prove a verb? I mean, anybody can just go online and type, "I am an expert in Python" on a profile. How does a system move past self-reported fluff?
That is the foundational hurdle, and SkillDrift addresses it by moving away from static text and toward dynamic proof-of-skill portfolios.
Proof of skill.
Instead of a chronological list of past job titles, the architecture is built around verified project artifacts.
Okay, what does a verified project artifact actually look like in practice?
It means integrating direct capability demonstrations. The platform connects to the environments where work actually happens.
So, going back to our financial analysts who taught themselves Python.
Exactly. On a legacy ATS, they are invisible. On SkillDrift, their profile links directly to the GitHub repository where they built that automation script.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It aggregates verified microcredentials, code commits, and peer-reviewed project outcomes. The platform mathematically verifies that the capability exists, elevating it way above whatever arbitrary job title the person happened to hold.
So the system acts more like a talent scout standing inside the club, watching how well you actually dance, rather than the bouncer checking your name at the door.
That's exactly it.
It doesn't care what your previous boss called you, it cares about the biomechanics of what you were actually doing on the floor.
Precisely. The capability itself becomes the primary currency. But, verifying the skill is only half the battle. The next mechanical challenge is how you connect disparate skills together to solve that buy versus build panic.
Right, because if I need someone to build an AI workflow and I see someone who is verified in Python and data structuring, how do I know they can bridge the gap?
This is where Pillar 2 comes in.
The sources introduce this as AI-driven skill adjacency mapping. Walk me through the actual math of how an AI understands that two completely different skills are connected.
It relies on semantic vector mapping rather than rigid keyword matching. The AI doesn't just look at the word Python and the word AI and look for a literal string match.
Okay.
It understands the underlying cognitive logic required to execute both skills. It maps the foundational requirements.
So it looks at the root of the skill.
Yes. It knows that if a candidate has the mathematical foundation to structure a complex data pipeline in Python, the cognitive leap required for them to learn an AI workflow tool is incredibly short.
So it measures the distance between what you know and what you need to know.
Exactly. It calculates the semantic distance. The engine identifies a candidate who perhaps has 85% of the foundational logic required for a role. It then flags to the employer that this candidate can easily bridge the remaining 15% gap with, say, a 2-week learning curve, rather than requiring a 6-month onboarding process for a totally new external hire.
Wow. That fundamentally changes the risk calculation for the hiring manager?
It completely flips it.
Because instead of paying a 50% wage premium for an external candidate who has the trendy title but might be a cultural disaster, the manager can look at this adjacency map.
Right.
They can identify a high-potential internal employee whose foundational logic is mathematically verified and say, hey, we don't need to buy this talent. We can build it in 2 weeks.
It drastically expands the usable talent pool. It transforms internal mobility from a total guessing game into a quantifiable, data-driven strategy.
Okay, but I want to push back on the reality of implementing this because the technology sounds brilliant, but you are dealing with human psychology here.
Always the wild card.
Right. Hiring managers are currently drowning in a sea of AI-generated noise. Every cover letter is perfectly written by ChatGPT. Every candidate claims to be a visionary thought leader.
Oh, the inflation is out of control.
And beyond that, corporate culture is deeply conditioned to respect pedigree. You're asking a Fortune 500 VP to look at a dashboard and hire a self-taught financial analyst over a candidate who has a Stanford degree and a flashy title.
That's a huge shift.
That is a massive cultural hurdle. How does the system get humans to actually trust the data over their own ingrained biases?
This raises an important question about the intersection of technology and human behavior. And it is exactly why the final piece, the third pillar of the SkillDrift architecture, focuses on how the data is presented to the decision maker.
Okay.
They utilize bias-aware competency dashboards.
Meaning they actively hide the pedigree.
In a sense, yes. It strips away the noise. When a recruiter or a hiring manager looks at a candidate pipeline on SkillDrift, they aren't reading pages of highly embellished AI-generated text.
Thank goodness.
And they aren't immediately looking at the university name or the previous employer's logo, which are the primary triggers for systemic bias.
Right, the halo effect.
Exactly. Instead, they are presented with a standardized visual quantification of the candidate's verified capabilities, mapped directly against the mathematical requirements of the role.
So it forces the hiring manager to evaluate the core mechanics of the candidate before they can be swayed by the shiny packaging.
Exactly. By forcing the evaluation to center on standardized, verified data points, rather than formatting or pedigree, organizations experience a massive shift in outcomes.
I can imagine.
They drastically reduce their time to hire because they aren't wasting hours interviewing people who just happen to be good at writing resumes. They prevent incredibly costly mishires.
Because the capability is actually real.
Yes. And crucially, they begin to dismantle the systemic biases that are just inherently baked into traditional proxy-based screening.
It's essentially replacing that broken barcode scanner with a high-fidelity diagnostic tool. A tool that doesn't just read the package, but analyzes the actual chemical makeup of what's inside.
That's a great way to put it.
And what is so encouraging in these sources is that the early data is actually proving this out.
The initial results are really strong.
The text highlights that early B2C users on the SkillDrift platform are demonstrating incredible mobility. They are proving that when you simply remove the artificial friction of ATS keyword matching, and you visualize the latent skills people already possess, the talent pool is suddenly overflowing.
It's abundant again.
The $5.5 trillion gap isn't a lack of human capability. It's entirely a lack of structural visibility.
And for the individual professional listening to this, it represents a fundamental liberation.
Absolutely.
It frees you from the historical confines of your last job title.
Yeah.
It means that your continuous learning, your side projects, your actual day-to-day execution, the verbs of your career, finally carry more weight than the static nouns someone assigned to you 5 years ago.
So, what does this all mean? We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the sheer terror of a multi-trillion-dollar economic deficit, and we traced it down to the broken 1990s database logic of our legacy applicant tracking systems.
The broken plumbing.
Exactly. We looked at the financial bleeding caused by the buy versus build mentality, where companies overpay for titles while simultaneously firing their own capable people.
The terrible cycle.
And finally, we unpack the mechanics of how a system like SkillDrift uses dynamic portfolios and semantic AI mapping to mathematically verify what we can actually do. This brings the entire deep dive directly to your doorstep.
Right.
Because whether you are a hiring manager pulling your hair out, trying to staff a critical project, or you are a deeply frustrated applicant staring at your 200th automated rejection email, you need to understand the mechanics of the game you are playing.
You have to see the board.
The panic is largely self-inflicted by the tools we are using, as the executive post from the sources summarized so perfectly. If you have the talent, you deserve the infrastructure to be seen.
That really is the ultimate synthesis of the data. We are standing at a critical juncture in the knowledge economy. The talent required to build the next decade of enterprise technology is already here.
They're ready.
They are actively knocking on the door, but they are hidden behind an opaque, outdated software wall. We simply have to stop letting legacy database schemas dictate the future of human capital.
Yes.
We have to move away from rigid job architectures and fully embrace dynamic, verified capability mapping. That is the only mathematical way to repair the broken bridge between employer need and candidate execution.
It is time to unplug the old barcode scanner for good. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've dissected the mechanics of how we work today, but I want to leave you with a final lingering thought.
Oh, this is a good one.
Something to really mull over as you think about your own career trajectory and the future of the global economy. We are rapidly moving toward a world of absolute verified capability mapping. So, if AI platforms eventually perfect the ability to mathematically verify exactly what we are capable of and exactly how fast our brains can learn new skills, well, will the traditional 4-year college degree and the prestige of past corporate titles eventually become entirely worthless?
That's the real question.
Keep questioning the systems around you. Until next time.